See, I don't even really need that opening either, though. Export. Is that supposed to be extortion? Nice. All right, we're testing the audio just a little bit. Nice. All right, we're testing the audio just a little bit. Well, it could be better, but I just have to be more conscientious of when I speak. Well, it could be better, but I just have to be more conscientious of when I speak. Okay, I'm cool with that for now. Just give me one moment. It's probably not the best lighting. What's the delay? No, it's not the best lighting. It's probably not the best lighting. Delay. No, it's not the best lighting. I feel like we could probably. Actually, I feel like I'm just not even really going to even concern myself with that right now. Because it's the mundane things like these that kind of get me caught up. And I feel like I take a bit of an unnecessary, I feel like I take a level of unnecessary risk when I begin to do things that are intended to, uh, or at least come with the perception of the intention of uh, forward facing public engagement, like actually actually working on things that are meant to be uh, seen and consumed by other people. And so I figure if I'm going to take that level of unnecessary risk, then I might as well go like balls to the wall with it and actually do it, because then I won't. Then I'll be more inclined to actually be more attentive and conscientious and engaged with what I'm doing, and not allow myself to so easily kind of drift off into distraction, disassociation territory. Um, so, with that being said, there are kind of a lot of moving pieces right now. And although I do plan on kind of reestablishing my presence on the internet and on social media and becoming more becoming more the this is so interesting because it's like when I there's obviously like a level of nervousness right now because for one it's just kind of like an unnatural predicament to put yourself in general, to like turn on a camera and start live streaming to the internet, not to mention the somewhat awkward nerves of just like sitting alone talking in your room. It's a weird thing to do. It's also something that I haven't done in a very long time, and I feel like this is probably, considering that fact, considering it has been so long, and considering the things that I plan on going through and whatnot, this is probably, to one extent or another, uh, something very different than it's ever been. Um, Although, with that in mind, the expectations or perceptions that are more than likely um, instinctual reactions to this are probably very misguided. Um, and I plan to kind of walk walk you through uh, those kind of like goalposts in which like what direction I'm trying to take this in and what exactly I'm trying to accomplish here. Um, but I feel like by doing this, it's just a much more direct and foolproof plan in response to trying to juggle the pun intended the man and the brand narrative and the disassociation that exists in that gray area in regards to um, the circumstances that I don't want to spend too much time irrelevantly explaining. So the approach that I'm going to take with this, it's good to so instantly be getting more comfortable and more natural with it, because that's the point. And one second. It should be said that actually I should go take this out there. Fuck. So it should be said that I am not necessarily going into this with the standard expectations or, like I said, even goalposts for what this will kind of generate. There are scenarios which I'm not even going to pretend honestly to try and predict anything. What I can tell you though is that as far as content creation and as far as my approach to social media presence and social media engagement and social media commitment moving forward is pretty different than standard or traditional approaches, even for myself. So, this type of content, it is possible that I could evolve into doing doing stuff like this more often. However, I highly doubt that that will be the case, and really, like a stipulation for that would be a really engaging viewer base, which for one I don't expect to get, and for two, that's really not the that's not really within the top five things that I'm necessarily trying to accomplish. However, I could see myself getting naturally kind of falling into that. However, why I think that that's highly unlikely outside of just the fact that this is not the type of content that I really want to focus on or engage in. I not that there's anything wrong with it. I just think that I just don't necessarily like see that working out. And it's not at all the direction that I want to go in. I do think that it is a good thing to do it relatively consistently for at least a brief period of time for various different reasons. But one of the biggest things so I'm very intrigued. So here, let me like kind of like talk you through my mindset. This is why I wanted to do this, because I want to talk through before I get into like uh, re-exploring old content and things of that nature, and kind of like building out this super serious, like super strict narrative. I do want to free form, free flow, free ball it. Um, Again, for various different reasons. If Okay, so one of the biggest things that I am kind of aware of and attentive to right now is what is seemingly a mass um, reconsideration of social media by just pretty much everyone in general. And I do understand why this is taking place. What I don't, what I can't really like predict is where that's going to go. I think that I do have a unique perspective, because I think that a lot of the things that are beginning to and are going to plague legacy social media sites are something which I have experienced in, or to a degree that I don't necessarily think anybody else has. An important caveat to that, though, is that I don't necessarily want that to be um, the focus, or the central um, the central aspect of my presence online, my engagement with the internet and social media, or my um, content moving forward. I want to embrace that. I'm speaking specifically to my own like historical experiences here over the course of the last 5 years. I want to fully address it and respond to it and explore various different aspects of it, to to the degree of which I think is interesting and important and entertaining to me, and also holds some sort of additional significance to anybody who would come across this. Because the way that I'm kind of going into this, or what I think is the best way to go into this, is the natural way, or the most natural way that I could, and that would be the um, that would be simply approaching it with the mindset of only having the viewer base in which I'm legitimately and directly connected with on the various different platforms in which I'm sharing my content. That's not true. The degree of which it's not true, I'm comfortable not knowing, and I'm comfortable not knowing and not being so hyper focused, or um, so concerned about that anymore. And addressing, that entire situation it's just not what I want to spend a considerable amount of time or energy or effort doing. With that being said, though, it is, a very significant part of my life still currently, and to different degrees, and certainly my my history. And I think in order for anything to ever make sense to anybody, including myself, like I think that there is a process of uh, I think that there are necessary processes of extensively going through that and kind of myself like closing, uh, resolving issues, um, at the very least with myself. So this isn't necessarily going to be a hard thing for me to accomplish or for me to um, stick to per se, because it really is kind of the natural mindset that just has just come to be, is that there is a level of awareness, there is a level of understanding, deeper than as deep as it can get and deeper than it has ever been, which is somewhat obvious uh, as things go on. Um, but I just I think that we're in a very different moment and time right now in aspects far beyond and greater than me, and I think that the I think that it's I think that that situation has just naturally fizzled out to a certain extent, and that's great because then that then gives me the opportunity to, um, finally begin to explore and experiment with, um, opportunities and kind of like desires and ambitions moving forward, and I think that I'm ready for that. These are very condensed versions of very complex issues, but overcomplicating these issues, I think, is more problematic than it is um, useful, at least in the uh, context of me, you know, doing this weird dance with the fourth wall alone, in isolation. Um, and we've also gotten to the point where that's just not even it's not even something I really allow myself to do to really any extent, but sometimes. Um, but it's rare, and I just like I said, I just think that we're in a very different moment, and I personally want to. I'm very eager to take advantage of that, and very eager to begin another chapter in my own personal life, um, and so on and so forth. So I do not want to give off the perception that I think. I mean, it's a weird balancing act, and I really don't want to commit to, conclusively saying anything in either one direction or another, because I just think that both are realistic, and I think that just simply acknowledging the fact that I do have this weird history and this weird presence, and so on and so forth, uh, to the extent that it is something that I'm aware of, and it is something that is um, consequential to various degrees at various times in various ways. I think that just that blanket acceptance and acknowledgement and awareness is pretty much as far as it needs to go right now, because like I said, I just don't want that to be a motivating factor, nor do I want that to be a central uh, like plot line moving forward, because there are a lot of things going on that I want to research and talk about, um, and I need to go through, I need to discover what it is that I want to do moving forward. And I mean, I've got like a relatively good idea. I've got good reference points. I've got good, you know, it is what it is. And I'm comfortable with the process of taking it to where I want to take it. And I'm not necessarily concerned about the, the baggage that um, I possess, just simply because it's not something that I'm, really trying to run from or hide from, or ever have been for that matter. But with a much more direct and like realistic approach, um, much more forward facing, much more um, rooted in this kind of conclusive phase that I'm in, right? That I've, grown into. I just think that that's it. And I think that that's where, how to do it. And I think that it's time to do it. So, with that being said, with all of that being said, what the fuck is wrong with you, Biddy? This obviously will be, like a process that is fluid, and that, adapts and reacts and evolves to, things as they happen. And while this is something that I think is necessary and the right thing to do currently, this is not at all the baseline that I want to establish. And to be entirely honest, and I'll get into this in more detail um, when we get to it, but actually, I mean, let's just kind of get into it, I guess. Uh, I know that I know that there is still significant correlation, and I'm okay with that. And I'm just ready to kind of like face that head on. So I think that is about as good as a little introduction, uh, that it, we're gonna get without. Jesus Christ! I got a fucking skinny hair tie thing. Oh, this shit drives me crazy when it does this. Unbelievable, this shit. Ugh. Oh my god. Unbelievable, this shit. Bruh. Oh, you know what? That's my own dumbass fault for flipping it in there. Damn. I know the lighting is whack. Maybe I will put the curtain up just for better lighting. So I think that is pretty much the extent of the rambling as far as that goes that you're going to get. And now I just simply establishing, the question, who are you, is obviously so um, uh, like ambiguous in my branding, and so it's such a significant portion of a particular phase of of my life and my branding and whatever. Um, I will say that when I speak about it in this context, probably only because it failed, because it's not something that I necessarily feel. It's not something that I feel like using terminology like that is not necessarily something that I feel is unjust. Nor am I too uncomfortable to kind of um, embrace like the legitimate um, technical aspects of a concept like that. Um, but it does feel a little pretentious just simply because it's something that's so outside of my control, and it's something that is so defined by really, really outdated and uh, in many cases just really untrue things. I'm not going to spend a considerable amount of time defending myself against those or anything like that. Um, and I think that as I begin to like walk you through this process, so that I can get all of this uh, dumb shit, honestly, kind of like sorted and out of my way. Um, I think that very rapidly, natural, you know, the like naturalness will come through and will begin to, um, you know, play its role. So And I will say, actually, another important note is that and this is probably why it comes, speaking about things such as branding and such of that, concepts like that, it feels so ucky, I guess, is simply because if I were producing the if I was doing the type of stuff that I genuinely wanted to do, um, and want to do, separate things, individual things, um, there would be very little focus on myself. And I think that probably there's two main things that kind of play into this. Um, One is, of course, the very earliest, and we should probably actually like be compiling shit. We don't have a super long time left, but we have enough to make a considerable dent as long as we're actually multitasking, um, instead of just yapping, which is the purpose of this. But but I mean, truthfully, before I get to revisiting old context and stuff like that, I feel like I need to set out, or I need to lay out a complete kind of mind map, uh, figuratively, not literally, and just kind of try and communicate and convey exactly what's going on currently, because it has been a long time since I've communicated in any considerable depth about honestly anything with anybody. So I think that one of the main purposes and one of the main goals of this should certainly be to kind of play a game of catch up, and quite honestly, um, I hope to in certain ways, uh, conclusively kind of like set the record straight for any and I think that this has been in the process of happening for a long time, and this is something that I also think that there are multiple factors that play into, some of those being just the uh, gravity of the things that have been going on in culture and society, and I think that that's a trend that's going to continue, and it's a trend that I'm not necessarily happy is taking place on because of the circumstances, but I am welcoming of that, just simply because I think that for a time, uh, in certain parasocial circles, I guess, like in certain corners of the internet, um, regardless of what else was happening, and whatever I was doing or not doing, I think that I was predominantly, the uh, persistent, um, kind of go to of sorts. Of course, I can look back on that now and think that, or realize the, the sort of like missed opportunities and stuff. Um, but at the exact same time, when I look back at that time, I I literally, it's just a lot of manic insanity that, um, I don't think could be healthy in any like degree, to any extent, under any circumstances. And it's not something that I want to actively pursue. It's not something that it, it, it's not anything that I want. So that's kind of like a double edged sword. Um, but I am grateful that over the course of this summer, and I think that um, this has been building up for a year or so. I think that probably my return to Hacienda, and then the prolonged stint there, and kind of the mundane nature of that. Even though at the exact same time I started to work on Fame, which is fire. I started to, there was a lot that goes on in there that again just kind of like understandably like strung on the investment and the intrigue and the entertainment value of the whole thing. But I think that the foundation and the structure of that entire system, it was just something that I knew and know and still stand by. It's just something that would just never work, at least in my benefit. And it's not even like it has to work in my benefit as opposed to other people's benefits, or even more so in my benefit than other people's benefits. It's just that I that entire model, um, by design, is and was and always will remain to be something that is just a lose lose situation for me. Um, I no longer feel restrained by that, or restricted by that or anything. I think that I can very easily wiggle myself out of that right now. It's just a matter of um, what uh, has been lost and what is like going to remain with me regardless. And of course, you know, when considering such consequential circumstances, and um, especially factoring in very, very real elements such as, um, I mean, the list is really endless, but trying to like juggle and respond and react and whatever, it's so simple even for me, and always was, like has been kind of simple to navigate, even more so probably from an outsider's perspective. But in theory, it is, at least, and um, but when you're dealing with such, like I said, consequential circumstances, um, while having little to no information, little to no confirmation, little to no real understanding of like what exactly is going on outside of the fish tank, um, it just does really crazy things, to your mind, and it just becomes impossible to even. It's fascinating, and that's one of the aspects that I'm sure that I'll eventually circle back around to and explore in great depth. Not only that, but even before this really began, things things in that realm were um, themes that I incorporated into my work and whatnot. So, obviously there is significant value in exploring that. There is high levels of interest on my end. There are um, transferable, uh, all the pieces are there. So that definitely will be something that gets circled back to at some point. Um, Again, I no longer feel restrained or restricted by that. Um, it's just a matter of kind of like untangling myself, which I feel fully confident in my ability to do. Um, and I will say that this right now is the accumulation of realizations and decisions that all of this kind of got began to be put into motion, or at least I realized that it was getting put into motion uh, somewhere between like 6 months to a year ago, around the time that I left Hacienda. So really even longer than that, about like 9 months. But I would probably chop off like a solid three, the first 3 initial months of that. Um, but I, for quite some time, I was very adamant with myself about the fact that I wanted to be like 15 minutes too late. And I feel like we're at that point. And I think that that's pretty self-explanatory. Um, Without going into too much depth, but I do just kind of want to like highlight that just a little bit, just to kind of like try and convey that to other people, and to certain like categories of other people. And mind you, um, I have I have not consumed social media in at least like the entire summer, and so I don't know what Pluto's doing. He's running around being crazy. Um, so I truly, for the first time, I mean, genuinely for the first time, have almost no insight onto into uh, where all of this stands, and that is another thing that I would like to eventually backtrack for a variety of different reasons, many more so than just actually. You, I mean, I guess I'll just finish this thought. There was this meme very early on, and it's really insane to think about, at least for me, like to think about like just so many different aspects of like 2021, 2022, 2023. Like those are lifetimes ago to me. And sometimes I'll be reminded of just different phases and eras of this whole thing, and it's just like, in order to properly, like truly properly, I think that it needs to be done. I think that it deserves to be done. And again, this is pretty much, I'm well aware of the fact that that this is much bigger than me. I said that for months and months, for a year, at least probably a year. But and I've also like shouted this out and um, acknowledged this in to various at various points for in various ways, and to in response to various things. And this is something that I'm so far removed from currently that I almost get re-overwhelmed, and it's not necessarily a bad overwhelmed, and nobody ever like would hear me out on this aspect of things. But I understand that what has been built and what has been experienced and what has been, I understand that it's all so much bigger than I am, than to any extent. And that's not necessarily to discredit myself to any extent either, but it's definitely, um, a form of like humbling myself, or even I would even go as far as to say as like shaming myself to a certain degree. And when it comes to these really nuanced complexities of all of this stuff, I feel like I have a very, very healthy balance. Um, and this is kind of like a superpower of mine anyway, and something that has, that predated this, and that I will say that I lost for a significant amount of time, but never entirely, because um, never entirely, because through my again, this is something that I don't even think about this too often anymore. So even just revisiting this thought is is somewhat overwhelming, and in this context, a positive thing. I'm so far removed from it that I can just objectively observe the negative aspects of it without it really affecting me to any extent. Not to downplay the effect that it had on the moment in the moment, um, but not to overly uh, whatever, excuse it away, or whatever, draw attention to it. Um, but when I think about those, and this is again something that has like transcended. It originally began with Cameroon, but I've this experience has manifested itself in so many different mediums at so many different times in so many different ways, that it could never all be you know, properly acknowledged. Um, but there's this meme that I saw, and I'm pretty sure it was like the very first, like the Betty White day, right? It was the Betty White day, actually. So it was like the big, like, whatever. I can't believe I'm getting into it to this extent, um, but this is part. I mean, this is something that's allowable, I think, um, and probably healthy to a certain degree. But um, God, and it was even like there was this meme where a little green alien was sneaking into it was a cartoon, like a graphic drawing, and a little green alien was sneaking in the window of like some little girl with a gun, like a ray gun, and she was all like fast asleep or whatever, and she had a drawing pinned on her wall of an alien, and it like I wonder if I could, it's somewhere. You see, this is what also sucks, is that I've made such significant progress in organizing my files, but I'm not quite there yet. And um, some of the biggest, most dense, most important files I haven't even folders I haven't even touched yet. So I wish that I could kind of, and this is the point of like doing this as well, is that so I can more effectively kind of just zoom my way through that to a certain degree, once it's done, once it's fully done. But there's just a lot to have witnessed and been at the center of to a degree, and be so uninvolved at the same time that from an outsider's perspective, from an outsider's whatever, from my perspective, from my point of view, um, I really did in so many different ways, just come across some of the most creative, like funny, weird ass shit. And that's an element of it that needs to be, that deserves acknowledgement too, um, properly, conclusively. That deserves a chapter in the story too. But my whole thing is, um, and this even kind of applies to the absolute, like, dominant. I mean, the stuff that I was creating, and the just the spirit that I had, and just, I mean, I was in such a magical place, just strictly speaking, from like an artistic, like, creator's perspective. And I look back on that now, and I still feel pride, and I still feel uh, connected to it. Um, and I still, I mean, and so, sometimes I wonder, like, you know, there's like, I think about, I've just explored the most fascinating, like, thought experiments in my pursuit of, trying to figure out, like, just trying to, like, process all this stuff. Um, I did not intend to kind of go down this alleyway, and I did not intend to really spend so much time on this in particular. But I mean, it's okay. But I also just think that this isn't necessarily the time nor the place, and I think that it also deserves more proper recognition, as does much, like, as do many, like, aspects of the whole thing. And so, that's an overwhelming task, and I also think that I have wasted a lot of time and a lot of opportunity, and um, even if you don't want to use terminology as harsh as, like, wasted, or anything like that, because while I think that it's valid, I also think that it could, in more realistic terms, it can be tamed down when taking the whole picture into consideration, and be, modified to something more akin to, since I've just the simple fact that I've invested so much time in the pursuit of that, in the pursuit of, those, in the pursuit of just, like, trying to compile all of that, in the pursuit of exploring all of that, and so on and so forth. I just think that since it has literally, taken years of my life, that it can wait, a little bit longer, and that the more relevant and pressing issues, and that the pursuit of really laying, um, really laying solid, foundation for a path forward, and kind of like, kind of in a way, like, reverse engineering it. I do think that that's a better approach, um, just, for a variety of reasons. Um, and that gets into the whole, like, man versus brand concept. If I could, proactively, um, work from both ends, and meet in the middle, and do that pretty effectively. Um, but it just, it just scrambles my mind so much to uh, try and compartmentalize the personal, um, the personal aspects of things, with a forward facing thing, and just trying to do it all at once. It just, at least in the context of, um, not actually doing it all at once, and with an approach such as this. Um, so while this is a massive, step forward, it also um, comes with the asterisk that this is not something that's going to be done in 12 hours. And, with that, considering that and considering the fact that so much time has been invested, and if you even want to say wasted on just a lot of the. I just think that it's kind of time to put that aside, and I would feel much more productive in doing and working on that, like in the background, with things, such as like organizing my files and whatnot, while actively, like, producing and presenting the more relevant stuff, you know, in a public forward facing way. It's just impossible to do both at the same time, and whenever trying to do one or the other, without addressing the man city elephant in the room or whatever, um, it just doesn't work, and I do allow myself to just get entirely scrambled, and then that's kind of like the self fulfilling cycle that I've been stuck in for a very long time, and that I have confidently worked myself to a point where I am ready to, like, very assertively move on from that. And quite honestly, the only thing that is really standing in the way of that is, for one, various different aspects of just myself, which again I'm confident in my ability to handle if I'm really, like, motivated and really um, determined to, um, which I am up until the point that we get to the for one, just the ways in which that my brain has just been entirely rewired, um, and just all of these, like, roadblocks that, I mean, my thought process in a lot of different ways, if gone, it's not even if it goes unchecked, like, just my it has had a very real effect on very minuscule and very megalithic aspects of the way that I think and the way that I navigate myself through the world, and the um, just a lot of things. Um, and so I've been kind of, like, analyzing that internally for at least 2 months, and kind of just parsing that out and figuring out what I can do myself up up to this point, at this point, and beyond this point, to mitigate and manage that, and especially without any of my, like, without any real support system, certainly not like one that I am used to, the ones that I'm used to, or anything like that. And um, but, like, again, I'm so comfortable with all of that. It's just I once I unless I it's literally just all, like, fumbled together. That's why this is literally, I mean this when I tell you that I am gambling more than I necessarily have to lose at this point, just simply because uh, pretty much doing anything other than nothing generates some sort of reaction, and that you know that all of it just always gets the 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 hive just gets, like, the whole nest just vibrates. I guess it's a horrible analogy, but you can kind of see, like, where I'm going with it. Um, but again, that's a gamble that I'm willing to take, and this isn't anything that's impulsive or compulsive or reactionary or anything like that, like it has been in the past, and I am both uh, entirely comfortable and cool on simply just not uh, really like getting into it with anybody who wants to get into it or letting that affect me or whatever. And uh, part of the reasoning for this is to kind of like reassert my own like declaration of like I'll send this YouTube link to somebody so quick, you know what I mean? And it's like these are things that I did, have done in the past and whatever. And but now at this point it's just kind of like you really can't acknowledge it unless you want to acknowledge it. And I'm so down to acknowledge it in realistic terms with anybody. Nobody seems to, be interested in that, and so that's I'm not interested in any other continuation of it. Um, which I should probably elaborate on. The in what specifics I'm referring to there. You know, um, but I'm just simply not going to, because believe it or not, um, all of this, literally all of this, I could be so okay with not being the central narrative, even myself not being the central narrative. Um, there is stuff going on, and there are things that I want to do and participate in and engage about, and so on and so forth, that are not rooted in this. And so while all of that is important, and I do understand the emotional and financial and all of the different types of investments that, well, actually I don't understand them. I can only pretend to understand them. I can only pretend to know them. But I can imagine them, and that's why I kind of want to start to, like I said, I was very assertive with myself about the fact that I wanted to be like 15 minutes too late for the vast majority of people, and I feel like I'm like 25, and I'm totally cool with that, just as long as they understand that, whatever, unless I'm included in something or clued in onto into something, or um, whatever, then I'm simply just not really responsible for whatever type of like parasocial relationships, whether it be positive or negative, or whatever. I'm not those. Some people, there are people who who's maybe even a lot of people, I don't know, but maybe nobody, I don't know. Um, and that's why I can't like take responsibility for it, nor can really concern myself with the you know uh, fallout or effects of it, nor should I have to be subjected to the um, and that's really the essence of how all this began. But we're not even getting into to that. Point being, I if you don't like if you know I don't know. I feel like I feel like I don't even really need to say much more. I feel like the message is kind of self-explanatory, and if it's not, then that's a um, problem that's just not mine to deal with or address or solve. But I do want to kind of be, um, and this will, you know, this will probably, and I know that I've alluded to this, but I really do want to preface with the fact that I think that maybe I want to think, because there's evidence to both possibilities, but even if it's one rather than the other, if if you're continually finding yourself as a spectator in this sort of yo-yo phenomenon of like whether like I just that just it again, not my situation, not my responsibility to deal with, but and I don't even think that the ones who engage in that are really too concerned with the real life aspects of it. I think that the game of it, probably for financial reasons and otherwise, and probably subconsciously and so on and so forth. It's just that they don't really want a conclusion or whatever. But if you are, you know, finding yourself to be, it's not even something that I need to elaborate on, because it's not something that I'm requesting, nor is it something that I'm really even allowing myself to be like subjective to at this point. It's just simply like, if I do, I'll do what I will do, and um yeah, I mean, it's just about completely reclaiming every aspect of my own life. Um, Honestly, and so yeah, there are many. This is like a scene cut right here. There are many great creators right now in various realms. For various topics. Actually, this is a poor segue into that. Um, though I do want to backtrack. I it's complex, honestly, because I am. Well, actually, let's figure out how we're going to structure this. Just simply because we have to properly lump all of this together, and we're definitely like stepping up a notch in seriousness. Um, like we're about to transition into um, the stuff that I actually want to be the central focus, or at least the beginning components of it, um, which will lay the groundwork for where things go, moving forward from here. So I need to be a bit more attentive and whatnot with what and how I say, and also how it transitions into actual tangible uh, work alongside it. But again, there's just many different tentacles to that arm. I know where, I know the order of importance and whatnot, but there's certain things that I want to, save for certain methods of like presentation and whatnot. And I am very adamant about the fact that I do not want to be a reaction creator. Like, that's not the realm that I want to inhabit. I still want to have the freedom to, passively and casually um, and maybe it's just something I just don't, and I won't for any number of reasons, but I do miss the hijacking of this isn't really something that's super prevalent anymore, but it is one of those mental roadblocks that I've developed where, particular, largely due to the fact that, you see, it has to be this section that I'm dancing in right now can't be. It has to be structured, and presented correctly, which I don't think this is the method of doing, but I think that this is the method of getting there, because overproduction, perfectionism is equally as problematic as, whatever. I just wish that, well, I mean, just get over it. It is like it is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, there's just different, like, just the normality, because essentially, essentially, that kind of like normality, that kind of like loosey goose, like, yeah, those just aren't the times that we're living in anymore, and that's not what social media is anymore. So I can sit here and pretend like I can sit here and boo-hoo and pretend like this is a individual problem for me and me alone, when in reality that's not the case anymore. And, like I said, a lot of the things that I, experienced and whatnot in regards to the dissolvement of, I mean, it's a lot of the things, if you really think about it, and I do plan on, kind of laying the analogies out, but a lot of the things that I experienced through my perception of all of this, and all of the ways that social media became weaponized, and, so many other various things, my experiences really do kind of like prophetically parallel, um, problems that are beginning to and will only continue to plague social media, and I do, um, for everybody, and I think that that is probably the best place to start as far as really really getting into it, into the nitty gritty of it, I want to on one hand I want to not have such a grandiose, serious, long form, heavy, whatever about all of this. On the other hand, that's kind of exactly what I want to do, and not really shy away from that anymore. Um, and naturally, different shades of the same person can exist. Um, I struggle now with feeling like anything is way too skewed into one side or the other, um, among other various issues that I plan on confronting in regards to things of that nature. So, I'm gonna finish this cigarette and collect my thoughts. I've only got 3 hits left. I do need to shower and probably get at least a little bit of R&R before work. And that's probably, honestly, that's really one of the most. It doesn't really manifest itself in my real life too much anymore. Um, Here and there it does, but that paradox between uh, kind of like short reactionary, more loose content versus really extenuous, like long form, research dense, um, substantiveness, substantive, substantive. Like I could passively, and I wish that I could too. Like I want to be clear about that. I wish that I could more casually address these things, or address these things in a much more funny way, or not so serious way or whatnot. The things that I'm about to get into, I mean, and that will shine through. I will definitely incorporate that just simply because I have to, for my own, like, you know reasons. But it does have to become these, everything has to become like a project to a certain extent, and that has and continues to, and always will and does. That's kind of like what gets me going. Like that's what I like, is really really diving deep. um and I know that that's out of style right now. I know that short form content, I know that rapid fire, you know react and forget, react and forget, react and forget, and all of these things. That's just not at all what I want to engage in at all. Like at all, I want to have the freedom to do that in a casual context, and um, even beyond that, I would like to, have more casual interactions with people. Just about stuff in general. But again, that's just not what it is. So there's really no point in like moping over that. But um I can't believe I've kind of like gotten this into it and gotten this and went this long with it. Um it's a good thing, but even even just sitting at this desk, honestly, it's just not where it's at. I really want to start utilizing things like my phone and my lapel mic and things like that more. And to be quite honest, it's a bit conflicting because I I want to still I want to do my research, and I want to, make, write these articles and make these really cool, like visual, like, I want to contribute to the conversations. I want to engage in the conversations. I want to create art um, and, communicate things in effective ways through humor and through, the the style in which is my own style. um but I don't, and I want to kind of, I'm going to at the very least do a broad, and this is another thing that we have to get into, is I switched to a new YouTube account just with like a fresh algorithm just to see what that would do, and it's a very intriguing experience. And what I was kind of hinting at earlier is uh, the problematic essence of me wanting to do. I definitely prolong things, and I definitely drag things out. Again, I personally feel like that is largely, it's not that it's not something that I am prone to doing in general, but without any incentive structure and so on and so forth. I think that this is largely a factor of um, circumstance, but again, that kind of mindset is just something that I don't think is helpful anymore, and something that I'm really trying to steer away from. But um, I feel like if I begin a project and, get to the point, I mean, the clock is winding down, I would either put this off until tonight after work when I have 2 days off, and then try to cram it all into 2 days, or, any other various, like, um, remedies for these internal blockages that I have developed. Just simply because I feel like if the it's even like, I can absorb as much research as I want to, but but proper research also does like require, like, you know time to kind of like sit and ponder on, and kind of like just natural time to, like, you know I mean, but I feel like if I don't get that done in one sitting, then it's ruined. um and that's probably one of the biggest things that I am gonna like confront head on, and kind of just like power my way through, because that is, the thing that results in, me investing these, hours and hours this whole entire night into all of this, and kind of like having a piece over here and a piece over there and a piece over there, and a video that, essentially amounts to nothing by the end of it. And then I go to work, and I can compartmentalize, I can shift on and off. um it's oftentimes a reluctance to do so because of those, self-imposed time constraints, and the awareness that I am essentially abandoning, what I just invested time and energy into by simply having to go to work for 6 hours. um and all of the complexities that come along with that create problems, both, in real time, and, like, elements of distraction, and elements of which again is not, I don't really think is present anymore. I think that it's a perception. I don't think that it's a problematic. I think that it's something that I can entirely like manage and balance at this point. But I really am just gonna kind of try and like power through that and really focus on like consistency and honestly discipline, which I've already implemented. Um, but I do. Yeah. What is another, thing is that like, what is that a shadow of? What is? Oh, that thing. Okay, I was like, what the fuck? Um, there's often a conflict in me doing what I want to do, like what like I personally am like passionate about and stuff like that. And um, there's just a lot of complexities. But I really really don't want to allow those aspects of this stuff to be a predominant plot line beyond what they need to be. Um, but yeah, there are much more effective things and ways of doing things. And like right now, like I said, I'm taking a gamble just simply by doing this because I am putting myself at risk for the um, which in a direct and open scenario I wouldn't really find to be problematic, but um, and honestly, just fuck it. It just is frustrating to me that instead of the juggling act is just frustrating to me, and that's really what we're gonna nip in the bud by doing things like this. I just think that people underestimate that this isn't the like approach or delivery that or even necessarily at least like 90% of the content that I've discussed right now, it wouldn't need to be discussed, nor would it be discussed in this fashion, in this manner, at this time, in this way, to this extent, whatever. And then, that then transitions into all like all sorts of like dumb shit. And it's like, well, but I think I'm gonna take a pee, and then yeah, yeah. I mean, it's almost time to go to work. So what can we really do with this time? I mean, like in yeah. I mean, essentially in an hour, I have to get ready. I mean, I can push those limits, but like I'll be getting ready for work in 1 hour, which wouldn't be so. Again, normal circumstances, but it is just not useful to try and apply circumstances and it's just not useful to try to apply things that just simply are not um, to like daydream and reminisce or whatever. Like it just is what it is, and I'm okay with it. I'm not. I mean, this doesn't make me any sort of nervous or anxious. It does make me just feel this familiar sense of having all of this unnecessary stuff that I feel somewhat compelled to have to work through in order for, like, instead of just actually doing the shit. You know what I mean? But I could not just raw dog the stuff that I'm going to get into without having this sort of conversation. Um, First, it's just the fact that I feel like that's a necessary step that has now consumed a considerable chunk of time, resulting in essentially nothing of substance as far as what you were going to walk away with from this just video or this live stream, in, specifically what has been progressed, like what has been further advanced in, I mean, it's just, this is a good thing. But even still, it's largely unnecessary, and I can acknowledge that. I do acknowledge that. But I'm also well aware of the fact that I could not raw dog the stuff that I'm going to get into without, this foreplay of some kind. Now the problem is that, you know what? I'm starting to. Okay, I'm gonna catch myself right here and just say that I am. This is a lot of like can'ts, wouldn'ts, shouldn'ts. This is a lot of the. And really, I'm just trying to communicate that. It's not necessarily that I'm, getting hung up on it. I'm just trying to document it, I guess. But it is a lot of the language and the excuses and stuff that I'm really, really trying to back myself out of. Mainly, predominantly, because it is not really truly representative of, like my internal thought processes anymore. For a long time that was all consuming and whatnot. It's not anymore. It doesn't mean that they're not still prevalent. It doesn't mean, but really, even to that extent, they're not really that either. I'm just glad that I am frustrated that there. I wonder. I. This is a lot for me, more so than than the public or whatever. But it also is like for you guys, for other people too, and so I really am unconcerned with any legitimate metrics of like viewership or engagement or whatever. Those two views are probably me, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with not having views. I guess that could mean live. But I am frustrated, or I'm disappointed in the fact that, in conclusion of this, you will have walked away with very little in comparison to what you could and should, and shit like that. And then, like, it's just, there's just a degree of frustration that is more motivating than anything else, that makes me grateful for the fact that this can serve as like a tangible, albeit though a, what's crazy, what's really crazy, what's always been crazy is that if and nobody would sit and watch this full thing, like, what was that, Biddy? Oh, the baby. Nobody would sit and watch. They would be like, "Oh my god, like what is this rambling guy?" Blah 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 blah. And I agree too. Like I couldn't just sit and watch. I'd probably skim through or whatever, but I'd have to be I'd have to be very invested. Um, which I understand that people are and whatnot, but um, do you understand the correlation of like the point that I'm making is that like essentially like a lot of this has, I'm not saying that this has been not at all has this been like entirely wasteful of either your time or mine or whatever, but to a large extent it kind of has in comparison to what could be being done with this time. And if you were to analyze this from outside of the confines of whatever circumstances have you invested, um, you too would be like, I'd like give me the 7 minute version. You know what I mean? Um, but it's necessary. I think that it's necessary, and I think that I guess also we can actually at 1:45:06. The only problem with this being is that I do not have the time to properly give you, and then if here's a whole other aspect to it too. I can give you the prelude. I can like give you some carrots. I can give you some like insight into the things that I'm actually kind of like observing and the things of actual relevance and importance that I am kind of shifting a lot my perception and my so on and so forth around, um, but I do so at the risk of not at the risk not at the risk because this has happened quite a lot where in both like terms of like mockery as well as legitimate like um influence, but at the end of the day it really like it that I'm okay with that. The only thing that I'm not okay with in in those situations or in those instances is the fact that that someone did it quicker, faster, better than me. Um, but that is something that I really can't like put on anybody else. Um, but that it does make me resistant to things like I am always conscientious of that in order to preserve intellectual property to as a loose terminology that I have to make sure that whatever it is that that's a prevalent thing that I that affects my decision making quite frequently. Um, Not necessarily a problematic and an overwhelmingly problematic thing. It is kind of sometimes it's whatever, sometimes it's actually cool. Um, it's something that I would absolutely like to, but then what? I mean, what could people? If I please, 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 even going through my archive is just. And what's crazy is that like I do love like long form like research, and I do love very fictional, things that are nonfiction, not fictional but non-fictional, um, like research projects and stuff like that. I do really really thrive and strive and thoroughly enjoy those things, those types of projects, um, absolutely more so than pretty much anything else. But and that's probably my strongest suit too, like my strongest area too. But that's essentially become the predominant uh, shit, just purely out of the lack of like ownership over any like original creative ideas in which I would have. Um, that's not something that really like burdens me too much. Um, and what's good about the tail end of this is that I am, I literally like these are conversations that I can't have with anybody else at all. Um, I can't like literally. I mean, literally, there's no expression or like back and forth to any extent with anybody at all about these types of things. And that's something that that's like always been present in my life. I've always had a Kaylee or a Jen or a Daisha or a Callie that I can, or a Scott or whatever, that I can just like really really talk shit through with. Um, and I'm at this age and whatnot. I'm not necessarily bothered with the fact that I don't, but just through the process of doing this, which I can't do in any other context, at any other time with any other person, just simply just because of any number of different reasons, I I like systematically pretty much eliminate about 80% of it as far as things that are um, persistent in my mind up until the point of like releasing them type shit. So, and truthfully, I could be a shit hoster. Hold on one sec. So I'm not sure if that's a real time. I don't think that's real time. Can I get the game for free? I will. I actually thought that this would take a lot more sessions than I think that it's going to in order to um, God, I wish. Oh, I wish we had the time because I'm not sure if this is a real time counter or not. Oh no, it's not. Okay, so that's cool. Um, yeah, no, that's cool. And that's because honestly, that is the. I even thought about doing this on like my second account, like my new account or whatever, um, just to kind of like add an era of. No, so that's not real at all, or not live at all. Which I promise you, I am entirely fine with. Um, and that would be the preferred approach, especially for this type of stuff. But I mean, if we were to get serious into it, though, that would not be really acceptable. Also, just now updates. Oh, so it's probably got to end. The view has to end before it counts. Interesting. Um, Good to know, I guess. Oh, why would it out people like that? That's horrible. Um, there's really like no real time analytics, I guess. But oh god, I wonder how much. I didn't know I had that option. There's really no like reliable real time analytics.
Can I get the game for free?
Oh. Yeah, there's really no real reliable real time analytics for your lives. I mean, what kind of sense does that make? It's fine, but not if this were. Well, now it's a 6. That doesn't make any sense. Not if this were. say plus? This isn't even correct. This is not even correct. When did this get wise? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um. Honestly, that makes it. That takes the pressure off a little bit. Not that there really was much any way, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily like promote this as must see content for like even like this isn't what I want to necessarily be doing. And um, I've already pretty much come to that realization. Although I would obviously like to. We really don't have the time, which is genuinely frustrating. Um, I feel like I do, but it's so easy to do that here at my desk too. Like just kind of like, and then to an extent, it needs to be overcomplicated. But I have pretty much accepted the fact that, for one, um, I would never get like I will never have like any significant. Pretty much the way that things are in this current like era iteration, uh, where it's still like prevalent, but much more muted and obscure, and like losing track of it. Like I'm not keeping up to date with profiles and things in the world continue. And again, I promise you, I'm fine with this. I promise you, I'm fine with this. And I really have um, more or less accepted the fact and not like I'm totally okay with it. I'm totally okay with it, and and I've said for a long time too that missing out on like that, just missing out on that whole experience, kind of. For one, it's just not the same. For two, it's I don't know. I don't want to sound too pessimistic about it, but I also don't want to sound like I am that I feel some type of way about it either. It's certainly not at this point with this stream and this and this you know drawl or whatever. Like I want to feel like I earn and deserve any like views and stuff that I get, And at one point I did. Um, this does not. I almost now I feel like I'm over explaining and unnecessarily working against my own genuine point. But I'm also just kind of trying to fill air at this point, which probably isn't really necessary. And I could probably, my clothes aren't dry, but I could probably start to get ready for work. I will say that I'm disappointed somewhat that, again, although I think that this served its perfect purpose correctly, and I think that this has definitely declogged my mind to a certain extent. And although I definitely think that expectations are probably let down, and but again, I don't even truly believe or know at this point if that level of intensity really even exists anymore. Again, something I'm fine with. And I sort of like the I like that assumption because then it really like loosens me up, and um that's something that kind of needs to happen a little bit. Uh, but yeah, so hopefully this may. I think that this probably in every way, probably not in the way that um whatever. I think that this did what it probably should, just not in the ways that people understand yet. Um, it's been a long time since I've done this, and it feels different in a good way. Um, Notes taken for sure, and mine cleared of a lot for sure. And kind of a recharge in. But what sucks? You see, what sucks though is like I want to explore both the. I want to. Although I think that social media, although I have a long spiel about social media and all of that, I want to. I just feel like I can't get like I feel like I just can't. Well, I can't ruin kind of the surprise of that either, but because I haven't committed to that, but I just don't want to cloud my own perception of anything. Like I think that complete detachment is the best approach for at least a little bit while longer. And then even then, I think that the general trend is I think that the general like vibe is just that social media. I don't know what's coming next. I have ideas, both for what I envision and for what I would kind of like to like try and influence to what degree I can, but or what degree, at least for my own personal self. But um, this has solidified like this has solidified something that I was fairly certain was a like a genuine conclusion that I've come to, but it's even like it's expanded that even beyond the limits that I realized. Uh, but my perception of an audience and the perception of, well, I mean, if you see real effects, but again, that's just not a valid, not in the way in which I'm describing it. This has loosened it up for sure. So I think that's probably about it for this. Um, yeah, it's 2 o'clock, so yeah. Because I don't want to be rushing around. I almost wish I would have done this earlier, and I already can imagine both like criticisms and, but neither of which I would really attribute much significance to, just simply because I feel like uh, whatever. Yeah, these are things that I'm fine with, uh, and don't really feel the need to commentate on. It's definitely reshuffled and reconfigured a few things, but I guess you'll just have to see how that plays out in real time. And I feel like there is a genuine possibility that nobody's watching this. That's a big thing. I feel like there's a genuine possibility. I would even say a 50-50 shot that the retention level of this stream probably fell off. I obviously have no real reliable analytics, but I truly feel like there's a 50-50 shot that maybe, like, I was gonna say like a Colin or Devin is probably still sticking around, maybe a Bo, but I could see them have fallen off already. About probably less than halfway through. That's a big thing. That's a cool thing. I'm also very aware of the fact that the exact opposite is somewhat equally as probable, but I think less so, honestly. And that is something that I'm just gonna kind of relish in. I know that sounds so weird, but that's a big thing. I feel like there is a legitimate possibility that I was truly talking to myself for at least a significant portion of this. I am honestly kind of surprised of how much of a effect that concept has. okay, I really am gonna end this now, but just for my own. You know, the thing is, I probably won't go back and watch the full 2 hours of this. I can't even go watch a 48-hour video to commentate on it of my own. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I've been trying to tell you. But that is such a liberating. All right. Well, that's that for this one. And that's crazy because I did what I needed to. I definitely did what I needed to.